Light it up, Aaron exclaimed in a palpable tone filled with anticipation and excitement as he watched the rows and rows of the servers in front of him. Yes, sir, Nova responded, and right after that, the fusion reactor responded to her command as it increased its energy production output that was being collected by the magnetohydrodynamic generator and was promptly sent to the transformer, which without wasting a single second was immediately converting the electricity into mana, sending it to the pipe which had started the race of pouring mana down the pipe. The tunnel screamed with energy as more and more mana continued pouring into it. Simultaneously, the transformer screamed, converting all of the energy into mana, which due to its high energy density, allowing it to carry 100 more energy units for the same amount when compared to most of the dense energy on Earth. After the first bits of mana arrived at the underground chamber, they immediately rushed out of the pipe and started dispersing into the maze-like structures that lay beneath the futuristic-looking metallic wall which covered the entire underground chamber. And as more mana continued to arrive, the already present mana in the mazes was forced to move forward, slowly filling the maze opening next to it. This continued for 5 more minutes, after which, if someone could see the behinds of the walls, it would seem to them as if the surrounding of the entire room was being blanketed by the mana, filling every nook and cranny of maze in the chamber all the way to the mazes that were present at the top of the chamber and was being held in the place by the constant pressure that was caused as the result of the mana being continuously produced and sent to the chamber the very instant an opening appeared. The moment the whole chamber was filled with mana, Nova activated the rune on the rooftop, indicating that it had begun working. The rune started radiating a gentle white light like any rune that had intent on it was activated. As the rune gained full power, the temperature in the room immediately started dropping drastically, causing the heat in the room to recede while being replaced by cold air. Shortly after that, the air that had been coming from the room transformed from its usually hot air into that of a cooling breeze, prompting Aaron to immediately cease supplying any more mana into the cooling rune in his body, which had been continuously busy cooling his blood throughout his time underground. Now its activation was no longer needed. Through his glasses, Aaron observed the temperature indicator in the room had started rapidly dropping and continuing to do so until it settled at 15 degrees, neither increasing nor decreasing from that number no matter what happened further. After another 15 minutes of maintaining the temperature at a constant 15 degrees, Nova then activated the second rune on the ground. This rune also wasted no time in coming to life, as if it was a beast that had been finally released from its cage. With the second rune covering the entire room, the whole space was now colored into a white color for those who were capable of perceiving mana. And once the rune on the ground had completely come to life, slowly the server rack-like machines started to hum synchronously as they emitted a dim blue light, indicating that they were now coming to life as well. The server racks were being powered by the electricity, which was produced from the rune present on the ground and was converting the mana back to the electricity. This electricity was then immediately transferred to the server rack machines through the superconducting and locked wheels, which had brought the server racks into the chamber. The electrical energy was then swiftly directed towards the batteries that were being used to power the motor, which had initially brought them here and at the moment had changed their purpose and had started working as a power supply and electricity regulator for the server racks. With the server racks now receiving full power, the synchronous hum, which in itself would have usually been a normal sound, became deafening due to the sheer number of server racks in the room, being not just a few but a total of 100,000 at the same time, due to all of them being activated at once, amplifying the sound to such a degree. And if it weren't for Aaron's magically enhanced body, the sound was enough to have caused his ears to burst. However, the sound gradually started subsiding until it completely disappeared, leaving behind a room that was now bathed in blue and was an indication that the server was now working at its full potential, meaning that the quantum server was finally online. Every server rack was filled to the brim with quantum computers, and since the server racks didn't need to come with cooling systems and the rest of the components, other than quantum computers, there was nothing other than the quantum chips within them. Within each server rack resided over 1 billion qubits, which in itself meant that every single rack was around 200,000 times more powerful than that of Nova's previous quantum computer that was at Aaron's home. And with 100,000 server racks present in the underground room, the whole server boasted a power of 20 billion times more powerful than her previous quantum computer setup. "Sir, the quantum server is online," Nova reported shortly, as the room returned back to its eerie silence despite the machines being powered. "Should I initiate the transfer sequence for myself and the universal simulation?" she asked, the excitement clearly evident in her tone. "How long is it going to take?" Aaron inquired, remembering that the previous transfer had taken Nova several weeks to completely move herself from the Gaia technology server to the quantum computer. "Although I can complete the transfer in a second, it's possible that it might result in me short-circuiting the grid where I'm residing in America. However, if I do it while considering those grids in mind, I can do it in 15 seconds, and while it would stress the grid but it will be able to handle the stress without causing damage," Nova explained. "Do it, but be careful not to strain the grid too much, as that might attract unwanted attention," Aaron instructed, to which Nova obliged and informed Aaron that it was going to take a minute to completely transfer herself and everything from the quantum computer, after which she waited for his approval before starting the process. "The system will be going offline for a period of 10 minutes as the server is undergoing an update process. We apologize for any inconvenience." "The system will be going offline for a period of 10 minutes as the server is undergoing an update process. We apologize for any inconvenience." After delivering the announcement to everyone wearing the glasses, Nova immediately logged out any users who were in VR and blocking their access to the servers, forcing all of the glasses to automatically switch to offline mode while using the quantum chips within them to assist in helping their user in whatever activities they were doing as long as it wasn't about logging into the VR. Following that, Nova officially began the process of data transfer. However, she didn't immediately start the transfer as that process was impossible to do before she had established a connection between the quantum computer and the quantum server. Immediately, Nova initiated the quantum entanglement process, which didn't take long or cause any problem for her due to the control she had over both the server and the quantum computer. Once the connection was completely established, Nova immediately commenced the data transfer process, transferring enormous amounts of data every second. The amount of data transferred from the computer to the server was enough to rival the yearly data transfer of the internet. A minute after the data transfer process had started, it came to a completion and was then immediately followed by Nova switching the computer she was using as a communication platform to communicate with Aaron, since all of her data was now stored there. As for the quantum computer at Aaron's home, it had entered hibernation mode. From this moment onwards it would be acting as nothing other than a data transferring node. Now its purpose was to receive the data that had previously been sent to the Gaia technology server, while the quantum computer was being primarily used for keeping the universal simulation active. The moment the new server received all the information, it immediately took over and resumed doing the functions of the previous quantum computer, but this time at a much faster pace, which was a benefit obtained from the increased computing power. Although all the previous processes had resumed, Nova chose to stop herself from resuming one particular process since she wanted Aaron to be present with her when this process took place. Hence she said, "Sir, would you like to watch the expansion of the universal simulation?" "Sure." Aaron agreed and took a seat, after which Nova immediately logged Aaron into the VR system. When Aaron opened his eyes, he didn't find himself standing in his usual place, rather, he was standing in space alongside Nova. Their size was so massive that even the Earth seemed no larger than a tennis ball in comparison to them. With Aaron now present along with her, Nova allowed the universal simulation access to over 75% of the quantum server. In response, the simulation immediately began to expand, with Aaron and Nova being the sole witnesses of this unfolding event. As the universal program was granted access to this immense upgrade in computing power, the simulation, which was once confined and encompassed only a small fraction of Earth, started expanding. It swiftly outgrew its previous constraints, the expansion beginning within Earth itself, and with meticulous precision, the program was able to simulate every inch of the planet's surface, breathing life into its digital replica. Ranging from the majestic mountains to meandering rivers, from the bustling yet towering waterfalls to even the remote wilderness, every single detail was intricately recreated. The virtual Earth pulsed with vibrant energy, a flawless mirror image of its real counterpart. Yet, the program's ambition could not be quenched at simulating Earth alone. Bolstered by the colossal computing power, it ventured further and started expanding into simulating the vastness of space, extending its reach to encompass every celestial body within the solar system. The planets, once non-existent, now materialized with astonishing precision in their details. The red deserts of Mars, the gas giants adorned with swirling bands of color, the icy moons with their fractured surfaces and the billions of rocks in the asteroid belts all were brought to life within this simulation. However, the expansion didn't seem to be content with the boundaries of the solar system either. With each passing moment, the simulation's reach stretched further, transcending the limits of humans' very imagination. The simulation broke free from the confines of the protective membrane that safeguarded the solar system from the ravages of this cosmic onslaught which was being sustained by the sun, venturing into simulating the uncharted void beyond, emulating distant corners of the universe. The expansion continued unabated, the program still thirsting to simulate more. It expanded further into the cosmic expanse, simulating remote stars and their accompanying planetary systems. The simulation breathed life into these celestial realms, meticulously recreating a vast tapestry of these celestial wonders, supernovae, binary star systems, and exotic exoplanets nestled within their habitable zones. The simulation pushed the boundaries of the known universes, which remained just as theory, as the program employed every ounce of available computational power available to sustain the unfolding expansion of the cosmos. Aaron and Nova watched in awe and disbelief as the continuous expansion of the universal expansion remained ceaseless. While they kept watching, everything was thanks to Nova continuing to expand their proportions to keep up with the increasing size of the simulation. They witnessed as the simulation size continued expanding, increasing the number of things simulated, not halting until they saw the famously known detail the spiraling illustrious image of a galaxy known as the Milky Way, revealed itself before them, followed by the immediate halt of the simulation program, finally stopping the expansion after it had simulated the last part of our galaxy, the galaxy-encompassing shield that was responsible for protecting our galaxy from the harsh conditions of the universe. "Wow," Aaron exclaimed, his hands remained on his face all this long since he had been witnessing something that would evoke the physicists to die just from the excitement of this awe-inspiring display that unfolded before their naked eyes. In the underground basement, Aaron's amazement surged even further as he envisioned the vast amount of knowledge in the universe's secrets that he had uncovered, all thanks to the galaxy rotating before his eyes. Meanwhile, Nova inquired to the still enthusiastic-looking Aaron, "Should I further increase the time acceleration, or do we stick to the usual 5-to-1 we had thought of before?" "How much can you increase it?" Aaron asked. Nova replied, "We can increase it up to 55 times, but that's only possible when no one has logged into the system. And currently, despite having our atomic printer, Earth's material advancements are still lagging behind in this aspect. The necessary materials required to ensure the safety of virtual reality logins, where time moves 35 times faster than the real world, don't exist yet, and to obtain them, we'll need to venture out into the unknown. So how much time acceleration is safe enough for the users to log in without facing any harm with the ability of the current devices?" Aaron inquired as he was about to conclude his next course of action. "Maximum of 10 times, however, if the logout time is to be extended to 5 more minutes, I can make the time acceleration go up to 15 times, Nova answered. "All right, accelerate the time to the maximum capacity we are capable of right now and at the same time open a new instance of the universal simulation. However, stop right after we are done with simulating the Earth. We will use that for the people who will log into the universal simulation," Aaron ordered after taking a short moment to consider everything. "Done," Nova reported back shortly since she had immediately raised the time acceleration of the Prime Universal Simulation to 35 times faster than the real world, while simultaneously opening a new instance and simulating the Earth, expanding the simulation until it simulated the Moon, before halting there. "Use the brain data of the scientists we have as an example and populate them in all those habitable planets in the galaxy. However, make sure that their bodies are exactly the same as would be if they had originated from here. Also, give them the knowledge of how things work, but don't give them answers to everything. Let them start most of the things by themselves from scratch. I want to see how they develop, since that might give us an insight if there were aliens on any of those planets based on their thinking process and technological advancement," Aaron said, pointing out what he had thought in order to use the universal simulation to the best of its ability after witnessing one of its advancements. "Although it won't provide us with a one-to-one comparison, It's better to have at least some base information as to when we encounter them, Nova said as she followed the orders, birthing trillions and trillions of lives in the universal simulation, bringing all of them to life inside all the 29 billion habitable planets situated inside the universal simulation. While the process was going on, Nova asked, should I make them capable of reproducing? Yes, make it accessible to them so that we can witness how different cultures emerges due to the increase in their number. Aaron nodded in excitement, realizing the potential. His order was followed by another question from Nova, how about death? Of course, with death always chasing behind, they will be forced to make more innovations, or that's what I think of it. Maybe they might even try to overcome it by inventing new technologies, Aaron said while explaining the reason behind his thought. What about the ones in the lab city? Nova asked after another moment. The ones in the lab city, leave them to be immortal, but allow them to reproduce since I want to see what will be the result if the children are raised in an environment filled completely with geniuses from different fields, Aaron said as he started imagining some super kids that would be roaming the city. Excited with the thought, he couldn't help but ask, how long is it going to take? Since I need to individually make their bodies capable of adapting to their respective planets, to finish the populating process of all of the 29,235,673,456 habitable planets, it will take me about 3 hours, Nova replied. Sure, take your time, Aaron said, logging out to do one last thing before he left the basement. Upon logging out, Aaron immediately put his hand on the door, the only opening to enter the server room. He then cast a shield rune that was soon etched onto the open metallic-looking doors. After 5 minutes of Aaron's focus, the rune turned white before he closed the heavy doors. Shortly after this, Nova immediately reacted by powering the shield rune that was etched on the doors, making it to be immediately covered by a blue hue, effectively blocking access to anyone without permission from trying to enter the server room. Following that, he immediately boarded the golf cart which, just like the first time, drove itself out of the underground, transporting him to the surface. The server is back online, sorry for the inconvenience we caused. Sarah received the notification while she was still in the middle of a meeting with a group of lawyers. Being the only one who can see and hear the notification, she simply smiled and ignored it, continuing the meeting as she asked, so, the leftover process should be completed by next month, right? Yes, ma'am. Although during the first phase, we were faced with a high level of repelling attempts, it disappeared after some time and the rest of the phase only required some time to be completed. One of the lawyers nodded in agreement. Even if this is good, I suggest that we don't let our guard down as they might be just letting it fester before making a comeback with an even more powerful attempt than previous, suggested another lawyer, immediately after the first one answered Sarah's question. That's true, and we should keep that in mind. I don't want any trouble or obstacles to appear in the process anymore, Sarah agreed. Yes ma'am, but also, this back-and-forth conversation between the lawyers and Sarah as they discussed the remaining steps that were required during the process of changing the company's registered country. Any chances that it is man-made? Asked James Comey, the FBI director, directing his question to the CIA director, John Brennan, during a meeting with the president, the vice president and a few other people in the Oval Office. Based on the analysis of our intelligence, the likelihood is very high, answered the CIA director. Based on what? Biden chimed in, asking for clarification with such a conclusion. Long before the clouds continued to form and started appearing, there was a huge transportation operation taking place on the island. We could barely count as over 100,000 machine parts were being transported onto the island, he explained. So, are you saying that those machines are the ones responsible for this phenomenon? Are they perhaps testing some weather control weapons or something? Obama, who had been listening throughout the meeting this whole time, asked. We can say with a high probability that they are not some weather control machines, answered John while shaking his head. How so? Obama frowned. We sent the satellite images taken by our intelligence collection satellites to DARPA for analysis and they informed us that for such a huge phenomenon to occur, it would require a machine that is about 10 times larger than what the part in the picture. Furthermore, it also had to consistently produce new clouds, given the range of the phenomenon, John said as he continued to explain further. Also they stated that if there really is such a machine that is capable to do such a feat, The energy requirement of such a device will be nearly impossible to sustain within a country like Eden, further assuring us of their analysis. So, did they come up with any reasonable explanation for this strange phenomenon? The Secretary of Defense asked with a frown. Yes, although they suggested that although there are few more explanations, this is the one of the reasons for having the highest likelihood behind the phenomenon, John said as he handed the POTUS folder to the rest of the attendees for letting them to read, while continued explaining to them as to what might be the cause behind the gray clouds in Eden. So, you're telling me that all of the clouds that were being produced for more than a month were a result of some mining that was taking place? If so, why didn't such a phenomenon occur anywhere else in the world? Obama asked after reading the information in the document. As the explanation on the next page states, it is the result of the combination of a perfect location, with the perfect conditions being met, along with the perfect catalyst, John explained, having difficulty believing himself for what the scientists have spoken. How about we send the Dragon Lady, U-2 spy plane, to find answers to all of our questions, Biden suggested. Although we can do so if the analysis of the cloud being collected is caused by the mining, it is going to be impossible to know what is going on underneath as the clouds are acting as cover for what is really happening. If we make it fly below the clouds, we will be visible to the naked eye and it might risk causing a backlash from the world, as Russia and China might interpret this as threatening the country to force them into choosing our side, answered John. That's also true, the Secretary of Defense agreed, as his gut was telling him that something suspicious was going on under this veil. Keep looking for more solutions, Obama said, receiving a nod from all of the attendees present in the Oval Office. You should remain, Obama said, pointing at the FBI director. The others understood that the meeting was over, so they immediately left the office, leaving behind only Obama, Biden and the FBI director, James Comey. Sir, James said after they were the only ones left in the room. How is the decryption of the data which we keep collecting on that man's house? Asked Obama with a serious face. We are still working in collaboration with the NSA, using their supercomputer in Utah. However, by their estimates, the closest time we can decrypt them will take us a few centuries, sir, James explained, lowering his head, feeling embarrassed with what he was saying. So, you are saying that the data coming from that house is encrypted heavily enough that even the current world-leading supercomputer would need centuries to decrypt? What the heck lies in that house? Obama frowned, not at all satisfied with what he was hearing from the director of the FBI. James then explained, we suspect it to be an experimental computer which he had made during his one-month visit to a university lab, but we can say this for certain that yesterday, we received information about a massive spike in energy consumption from his house for a period of a minute before it returned back to normal. We are planning to use this incident as an excuse to get access to the house by sending our people as the grid officers to investigate the cause of this incident. Good, because whatever it may be, I need answers. He is in the process of moving his company from the clutches of our reach, and then there is also someone powerful looking out for him, rendering all my efforts to try to block his attempt futile, Obama said with an ashen face as he continued. So, I need something from this investigation as quickly as possible so that I can use it as a means to infinitely delay the process, Obama said, his tone indicating that he was fed up with the power of a few families blocking his attempts from stopping a golden goose who was trying to escape his country's clutches. Dropping a heavy weight on the shoulder of the FBI director as his last attempt would be a deciding factor as to whether Obama can have a chance at stopping Gaia technology from leaving or if he would be made to watch the goose fly away without being capable of doing anything. While the president had finished his meeting with his subordinates, somewhere else. We have already hired around 100,000 people, and from our cooperation with the government, we have already been able to buy more than 50% of the land required for our projects, Felix reported to Aaron, meeting inside the second universal simulation that solely stimulated Earth. How much of the railway network land have we already purchased? Aaron inquired further. Since most of the land is passing through the wilderness most of the time, we were able to acquire about 89% of the railway network land. As for the remaining portion of the land, since we have to negotiate with different landowners, however, the negotiations are also in the last steps and this matter should be resolved within this month, Felix answered, as he presented the information about railway land acquisition. That's good news. We can begin the construction immediately, Aaron said, a smile gracing his face. If we start the construction by this month, when will be the closest estimate for the railway to be completed? He asked after a moment of thought. Nova, who had been standing behind Aaron, replied, "It will take about 15 months if we divide the whole railway project into thousands of small parts and assign multiple builders for the construction of those portions. Later on, when these constructed parts are combined, we can send them to initiate the construction in another region. And if they work in 3 shifts of 8 hours, the work will continue without any break. However, for the project to achieve that goal of completion, you would need about 3 times the current amount of workforce which you have already hired," she added by the end. "We can increase the workforce once the project has started, so based on your estimates, it should take about 17 months for construction of the entire rail network to finally end," Felix chimed in. "Can't it be finished earlier than that?" Aaron asked, concerned that he might not be given enough time by the world before other interferences would emerge, trying to interfere with his growth. "The limitation is manpower, sir. Although we will be able to increase the number of people in the project, it won't be cost-effective. However, we can simply focus on a part of the railway that is of the most importance and start the construction by solely focusing on its completion in a matter of a few months. After that, we can just repurpose the workers to expand the rail network, finishing it in a year or 2. Nova suggested, offering another approach. "That makes more sense. We indeed could start by focusing on the railway network from the airport and the ports to the island. And once that is done, we can then immediately start expanding the network within the city and other cities, finally linking the rest of the country with the rail network. This will act as an artery, keeping the country connected and at the same time, provide good-paying jobs to its citizens for a period of a year and a half," Felix agreed after hearing Nova's suggestion. "How long will the construction of the ports and airports take?" Aaron asked when the topic was brought up in the conversation. "For the airport, we can make it operational in a matter of 6 months, but the whole project's completion is to be expected to take 2 years. Felix answered about the airport and continued to answer about the expected completion time for the ports. As for the ports, it will take about 9 months to make them operational and about 2 years for their complete compilation. Upon hearing their response, they took a moment to think about ways to expedite the process even faster. "How about we do it this way? We create large, moving atomic printers and just label them as the machines we made to ease construction," Aaron suggested his idea, wanting to understand how they thought about it. "Isn't that the same as revealing our atomic printers to the world?" Felix asked after hearing his friend's suggestion. "No, we are not going to make it print and build everything. All it will be doing is act as an assistant to the construction project. For instance, it can be used to produce and fabricate the pieces while the workers will be responsible solely for the purpose of construction. This will make sure that the workers only focus on the construction and won't have to worry about the production of the material for the construction," Aaron explained as he further continued. "We can also create another one which looks similar to the Caterpillar construction vehicle that will be responsible for constructing the runway. As for the question about who will be controlling it, all we have to do is send Ares members who will be given the responsibility of building railways and ensure that the other workers can focus on their tasks without poking their noses in it," Aaron said, diving deeper into his reasoning. "As for the ports, we can send something similar to the fabricator which we will be sending in order to aid the airport construction, but we'll also send another one that will be responsible for the complete underwater construction, allowing for the atomic printer there to work to its full potential without having a need to be worried about anyone being able to see what it was doing and start asking suspicious questions." Aaron continued, getting even more excited as he spoke. "For the rails, we can just build one that looks like an existing railway constructing car which exists in the world, and all we need to do is have the people construct a 200-meter-long railway section, upon which we will then immediately put the machine and send the workers a few hundred kilometers away for them to construct another patch of 200 meters railway again. This way, we can finally have about 100 of these machines working on different sections of the railway's network, connecting the rails while they build the parts of rails before they finally meet their fellows and connect them." Aaron finally paused, taking a breather before turning to Nova and asking her with an expectant look in his eyes, "Is it feasible while ensuring that no one, even in the slightest, suspects that we have such unimaginable capabilities?" Meanwhile, Nova, who had already simulated the situation millions of times while Aaron was suggesting the idea, replied a second after she was asked, saying, "It is feasible." She paused shortly before continuing, for the ones that will be sent at the airport and ports, as long as we make the machines look like something that can be found elsewhere in the world, we can trick them into thinking of them as just mobile fabrication machines that aid in construction. As for the ones responsible for the railway construction, we can do that too, but we will need to design at least 3 different looking machines to avoid raising suspicion. One that will be responsible for cleaning and strengthening the ground the rail will be passing by. The second will be responsible for laying the foundation on the strengthened ground, while the last one will be responsible for laying the rails on the laid foundation. If we proceed to do it this way, we will be able to avoid any suspicion about having a printing technology and would only make people believe that we've had a breakthrough in the construction technologies. Though groundbreaking, it will still be digestible enough for people to convince themselves with. We will also need to program them in a way such that they would operate similarly, making their assumption appear true, such as reducing the speed of material production and a few other adjustments. Nova took a pause before continuing. As for the one that will be responsible for underground construction, there's no need to worry about any of the above problems since we can simply make the water murkier and impossible for the people to see the underground construction. We can leave it with its full range of capabilities. When Aaron heard Nova's agreement to his plan after she had done a few alterations to it, he grinned from ear to ear, satisfied and excited. With those machines alone, the time required for the complete completion of the project would be cut from 2.5 years, which was already exceedingly fast enough, to a matter of a few months, which would be nothing more than making a historical milestone. Felix, on the other hand, remained surprised by what he heard from both Aaron, who gave such a crazy idea, and Nova, who made this crazy idea become applicable to their situation without risking the revelation of the technology to the world. That's true, with the machines now involved in the projects. It means that we can start the remaining of the projects at the same time without having to delay them due to a shortage of workers, Felix said after taking a moment to collect his thoughts, not at all expressing what he was feeling since he had prepared himself beforehand, knowing well that he will always be surprised by Aaron and his assistant, and thus wasn't disappointed at all when Aaron solved one of his problems moments after he discovered it. Then we can just utilize similar machines for the rest of our projects, right? Felix asked. Not all at the same time, as that would raise a large number of questions on how we are even producing those machines in such a short period. There will be a need for a delay in their arrival at different projects, Aaron answered, showing that he didn't need Nova's help to think that far. They continued their conversation, discussing how to use the machines to expedite the other projects that would be starting simultaneously with the airport, railways and ports. One of these projects being the official headquarters of Aaron's companies. After they finished discussing and approving the modified plans, while Felix was waiting for the logout time, he asked Aaron, "But what happened to the city? Why has there been no one in it since the announcement of the upgrade?" Due to the increase in computing power, the simulation grew to the size of a galaxy, and to receive the most benefits from it, I had to accelerate the time there as much as possible. But this also became dangerous for people to log in and out of it with their current devices. So, I ended up starting another instance of the simulation that solely simulated the Earth and increased the time dilation to the maximum capacity that the devices can handle. As you are experiencing now, it requires you to wait for about 5 minutes to log out, Aaron explained. This time, Aaron's reply surprised him even though Felix was prepared. Even in his slightest imagination, he would never have imagined that the update would result in such a massive evolution. What surprised him, even more, was that this entire process had occurred within just a few minutes, as the server went offline for exactly about the amount of time before it came back online. This meant that the simulation had gone from being the size of a small country to the size of a galaxy in a matter of seconds. As he tried to fathom what type of computing power was required to accomplish such a monumental expansion, he realized that his brain was failing to comprehend it, even with his wildest imagination. It took him a minute or two to slightly calm down before he decided to ask a question that came to his mind. "Now that you mention it, I remember you saying that you were going to give us assistance after you have upgraded the server. Was this upgrade the one you were referring to during that statement?" Felix asked, knowing that having an assistant like Aaron's would significantly ease his job. "Yes, I'm in the process of creating them. In a few days at most, I will send them to you," Aaron answered with a smile, hiding his slight embarrassment, although he hadn't forgotten it and had only postponed it a little. But Felix's question reminded him that it would only take him a few minutes to finish creating them. So, he promised himself to start with the making of these assistants the moment Felix logged out. Really? Felix asked. The excitement on his face was too hard to not be noticed for even the most non-social person to understand its meaning. Yes, Aaron confirmed, but before Felix could even reply, he was booted out of the system as the waiting time for his logout was over. Now, Nova, let's get to work and send the assistants to them as fast as possible. It seems like they really need it, Aaron instructed. Yes sir, Nova replied as she immediately materialized different profiles of the people who had the glasses and whom they were going to be making assistants for. This meant Sarah, Felix, John and a few high-level Ares members had their profiles materialized in front of Aaron. Create an assistant for each one of them that will match with their personality while also focusing on making sure that the assistants are the most helpful to them in their specific fields. Aaron started to give instructions on what the assistants should be like. How much computing power should I allocate to each of them? Nova asked. Taking a moment to consider, Aaron answered, saying, they should be small enough for them to be able to operate independently on the glasses of the people they will be assisting, while leaving the backups on the servers, just in case. Done, Nova responded the moment Aaron finished his answer, causing Aaron, who was the most likely to not be surprised by her speed, to be astonished for a moment before he calmed down and said, send them. Nova wasted no time, sending the assistants to their designated users. Done, after a moment, she confirmed. How are the tensions with Hesperia going on? Aaron asked John in the VR after he had called for him, to which he immediately came without wasting any time at all. John reported, they have increased soldiers on the border and have also been trying to cause some troubles for us. As a result, we reciprocated their actions and sent additional reinforcements to the border on the island we share a border with them. Additionally, we've deployed a few boats to patrol the waters we share borders with them. Any chances that it goes out of control? Aaron asked. Chances are not zero, but as long as we keep discipline on our side, the uncertainty of starting a shootout will remain on them, John reported confidently. What are our chances if a shootout occurs? Aaron inquired. John's response was straightforward, not sugarcoating anything, both on the ground and in the water, we have almost no chance of winning. Ma Euro, Aaron hummed in thought before asking, I can understand that the outdated equipment for the Navy branch may be the reason for the possibility of losing on the water, but what is the reason for us losing on the ground if the weapons are still in good condition? John explained, there is no discipline among the soldiers sent there at all, and as you had ordered, we implemented a way to force them to restrain themselves from causing troubles. However, it's only a short-term solution, and it won't be effective in the long run. Cracks in our control will start to appear soon. John then asked, is your plan to instill discipline in the soldiers going to take longer than the requested period? If I remember correctly, there should be about 2 weeks until the 3-month period I asked from you, right? Aaron inquired, trying to determine the remaining time to the promised period. 2 weeks and a few days, sir, John answered promptly. Good, then choose 5,000 of those who are most likely to cause problems and prepare for them to be sent immediately when I tell you to do so, Aaron instructed. Yes, sir, John replied, acknowledging the order. Aaron then inquired, any chance it is going to interrupt some of the security-keeping tasks? At the moment, since we only have tensions with Hesperia and no one else, most of our forces are focusing on that. So we can send 5,000 of them without facing any problem other than a slight crunch in shifts. Nothing they can't handle, John reassured, outlining that the current situation allows for such a move without compromising overall security tasks. If there is no problem with that, then you can send them since they will only be spending 2 weeks, nothing more, nothing less, Aaron said, affirming the decision. He then paused for a moment before adding, from tomorrow onwards, start sending a group of 50 from the original Ares members as well. They too will need to receive refreshment and new weapons training. Yes, sir, I will do so, but can I ask a question? John sought permission to inquire further. Aaron nodded, signaling John to proceed with his question. Are you going to send them to this world to train? John asked his question. Yes, but not to a peaceful world, per se, Aaron replied, pausing before continuing, at first, the needed knowledge will be assimilated into their brains. Then they will undergo a 1-month training to ensure that the knowledge has been properly absorbed. Following that, they will be sent to war against a technologically advanced foe, similar to them. I want them to gain experience and understand the harsh reality of war. Additionally, I will be using this to identify if there are smart individuals among them who can come up with new strategies. It will also serve as their final test. John raised a concern. Doesn't that increase the risk of the technology being leaked to the world? Aaron explained his approach. If we can upload knowledge, then it means we can also upload fear into their consciousness without them knowing. This will automatically prevent them from talking about the technology. Understood, John replied, feeling impressed by Aaron's careful planning and the measures taken to safeguard the technology and maintain secrecy. Upon seeing John's expression, Aaron spoke, "Your assistant will be responsible for coming up with those contingencies in all of your plans, so use her help as much as you can." "Yes, sir," John replied promptly. He had already intended to maximize the use of the assistant's abilities from the beginning, considering she was specifically sent by Aaron to aid him. Furthermore, John continued, "Also, sir, I want to inquire about your plans for weapons procurement. While our troops will be well trained after they are sent to you, if we still possess outdated weapons, winning wars or skirmishes will prove exceedingly difficult." "Follow me, and let me show you the answer to your question," Aaron declared. In a blink of an eye, before John could fully comprehend the situation, he found himself already transported into the midst of the skies above a chaotic city, where the thunderous sounds of explosions echoed through the air. When John opened his eyes, he couldn't believe what he was seeing under him. The scene was overwhelming, with buildings in flames and smoke billowing all around. The ground shook from the impact of the explosions, and the sound of distant gunfire added to the atmosphere of conflict and chaos. In the midst of the ongoing battlefield, John found himself witnessing unfamiliar and advanced weapons wielded by the soldiers engaged in combat. As John tried to compose himself from the intense scene he had just witnessed, a sudden explosion erupted amidst the group of soldiers on the ground. The soldiers were engulfed in a fiery blast, and John's heart sank when he saw the devastation caused by the shell. He quickly turned his attention towards the source of the attack, but to his surprise, there was no visible sign of the assailant. The tranquil blue sea stretched out before him, offering no clues as to the origin of the fired shell. It became evident that the one who attacked possessed long-range weaponry, far beyond the range of his vision from the sky. Upon turning his gaze back to the explosion site, he discovered that the soldiers had fainted and were lying on the ground. Surprisingly, apart from that, it seemed that the explosion had not caused any other harm to them. His assumption was swiftly validated as he witnessed one by one, the soldiers on the ground waking up, retrieving their weapons, and returning fire. With his focus solely on them, he came to the realization that there was no one within a kilometer's vicinity that they were firing at. However, as he raised his head and looked beyond that distance, he finally spotted the target of their relentless assault. A group of enemy soldiers stood approximately 2 kilometers away, and to his amazement, the shots fired by the soldiers were hitting the enemy soldiers with remarkable precision each time they pulled the trigger. As he turned his gaze back to the soldiers on the ground, a sudden disturbance caught his attention. Something swiftly passed by them, hitting the ground nearby, and before he could comprehend what it was. Boom! The ground under them shook violently as the shockwave rippled through the air. Dust and debris quickly engulfed the area, making it difficult for him to see clearly. In a split second, he reacted instinctively, leaping towards Aaron, attempting to shield him from the explosion's shockwave. But as he did so, it dawned on him that they were inside a virtual reality simulation, and in here, no real harm could befall them unless Aaron consciously permitted it. Understanding the truth, he let go of Aaron and swiftly returned to his previous location he used to be before the explosion occurred. With a sense of relief and newfound clarity, he resumed his observation of the ongoing battle, knowing that their safety was assured. Raising his head, he focused on the distant horizon to trace the source of the bomb. 2 fiery embers glowed at the edge of his vision, confirming his suspicion that the bomb had been dropped from a fighter plane. However, his fleeting sense of calm was shattered as another torrent of bombs descended upon them. Yet, this time, he remained assured that they were safe. Lifting his head, he beheld a colossal fleet of bombers showering explosives upon them. akin to grains of sand falling from the sky. Yet, their impending doom was short-lived, for the shells from the tranquil ocean swiftly annihilated the fleet of bombers. Then once again, the ocean regained its composure, just as it had on its initial encounter. For over 30 minutes, chaos ensued while Aaron remained silent, observing the unfolding war around them. John, on the other hand, could only spectate, feeling the intensity of the battle. Finally, without a word, Aaron teleported both of them to a warehouse brimming with weapons. "Let's take a look at the weapons then," he said, making his way to the first rack adorned with a collection of sleek, identical, futuristic-looking guns. Aaron explained, "This is Model 1. We're currently referring to it by that name until we come up with something more befitting of what it can dish out." He picked up two of the guns and handed one to John, who promptly began scrutinizing it closely. As they inspected the guns, John suddenly found himself transported to a shooting range, accompanied by Aaron's continued explanation. "This is what you can call a railgun," Aaron clarified. "It utilizes electricity which is stored in the form of mana inside the shell of the bullet instead of the usual gunpowder to accelerate bullets along the rails on the barrel. The railgun's design enables it to shoot over very long distances, as long as there's sufficient electrical support for firing at that range." Pausing briefly, Aaron swiftly resumed his explanation. "As part of its advanced features, it's equipped with a smart scope containing a computer chip that gathers data from all the gun's sensors. This chip then processes and relays the information either to the scope itself or to a soldier's headgear if he is wearing one," Aaron explained, handing John a military headgear that seemed to materialize out of thin air. "Put it on," he instructed, in which John wasted no time and put it on. With the military headgear securely in place, John experienced an immediate transformation in his perception of the world. As the headgear activated, a golden wave emanated from it, extending to cover a vast 3-kilometer radius and collecting data from the entire 6-kilometer diameter. Within this expansive range, the headgear collected and processed all available information, no matter how seemingly insignificant, within its 6-kilometer diameter. At the periphery of John's vision, he could see details about the number of people within the 6-kilometer bubble. Currently, there were only 2 individuals present, himself and Aaron, who was marked in green to indicate he was a friendly contact. The headgear also provided real-time information about John's weapon, displaying that he had 50 bullets remaining in his gun's magazine. This knowledge would prove invaluable in the heat of battle. Upon turning his gaze towards Aaron, a distinctive name appeared above his head, written in elegant golden letters. Aaron Michael, G. The G designation revealed that the headgear's information identified Aaron as the General of Ares. But before he could look around more to get used to the headgear issued a warning about the presence of enemy forces entering the 6-kilometer bubble. John's attention snapped to where the indicated threat was coming from. Even though they were completely obscured by buildings, the headgear's advanced technology allowed him to see the complete outlines of the approaching enemy group. John focused his attention on a single enemy, and immediately, the headgear sprang into action, displaying an astonishing array of details about the adversary. It showed every piece of equipment the enemy had, from the type of gun he carried to the number of bullets in his magazine. Additionally, the headgear revealed information about the thickness of the enemy's armor and much more. Realizing the significance of this level of information, John understood the immense advantage it granted him. Knowledge of an enemy's gear and capabilities was a game-changer in combat. Having access to such details meant that if you were the enemy, you were better off jumping into a volcano, as in doing so there is at least a chance of you surviving from that than surviving from someone who had that much amount of information about you on the battlefield. Aaron's swift and precise action left no room for hesitation. As soon as the enemy took cover behind a wall that provided no other protection except the wall itself, Aaron opened fire without a moment's delay. With the railgun's extraordinary capabilities, the bullet pierced through the 2.5-kilometer distance, effortlessly penetrating the wall and striking the enemy with deadly accuracy. The enemy, caught off guard and unable to comprehend the speed and accuracy of the attack, fell victim to the fatal shot, succumbing instantly before he could even react to the danger he was facing. Now with an assurance that he could fire at the enemies after he saw Aaron firing at them, John quickly raised his gun and aimed at the highlighted enemies. As he raised his gun, he witnessed the headgear's real-time feedback, displaying a red dot that precisely indicated the bullet's trajectory if fired at that moment. This feature allowed him to gauge where the shot would land, ensuring a more accurate aim. Upon aiming at the first enemy, the red dot turned yellow, accompanied by a warning that the bullet's path would be blocked by the obstacles on the way, making the shot futile. John heeded the advice and immediately moved on to the next target, as indicated by the headgear's green light, signaling an optimal shooting opportunity. Without hesitation, John fired his gun, and in a matter of moments, the targeted enemy collapsed, taken down by the lethal shot. The headgear's data analysis was proving to be an indispensable ally, guiding John's decision-making in real-time combat scenarios and allowing him to maximize his efficiency and ammunition use. The silence of the gun's firing was deceptive, as its low hum remained unnoticed amidst the intensity of the battle. However, the recoil from the powerful railgun was nothing short of astonishing. Even with John's enhanced abilities due to Aaron's healing bombardment, the force exerted by the weapon's firing was substantial, slightly pushing him backward with the firing of the shot. Now with John having gotten the gun's feel, he swiftly shifted his attention to other enemies, firing the weapon with precision every time the headgear indicated a sure hit. The seamless coordination between his actions and the tactical data led to a swift elimination of the remaining foes. In a mere 10 seconds, every enemy on the battlefield had been neutralized. Aaron skillfully dispatched about half of them, while John efficiently handled the rest. Their combined proficiency, aided by the advanced technology, resulted in a remarkably swift and decisive victory over their adversaries. "How does it feel, after all the enemies had perished?" Aaron asked John. "Unreal," John exclaimed, brimming with excitement. "With just this gun and the headgear, I'm confident that a trained infantryman could take on a team of special forces and emerge victorious, as long as he maintains his distance and prevents them from closing in." John's elation was evident in his every gesture, and his rapid breaths reflected his realization of how these two technologies could enable an ordinary person to eliminate a well-trained group of special forces. "Indeed, this is just the beginning," Aaron said with a satisfied smile on his face, before they found themselves back in the warehouse, and since John was still wearing the headgear, he was now presented with detailed information about each weapon within the 6 kilometers diameter of the warehouse. However, given the immense size of the warehouse, the data he was seeing was approximately 5% of the weapons present. Printraction, new word I came up with combining construction and printing into one. Few minutes before the weapons demonstration was set to begin, Nova had been observing Aaron's meeting with John. The moment John asked if Aaron was prepared for what he had planned to do in order to instill respect and patriotism within the former soldiers who were on the verge of causing trouble, Nova immediately got to work while Aaron assuringly answered John that he would be ready in time and John should be preparing for the first batch consisting of 5,000 members that they will be sending, as requested by Aaron. At the fusion reactor site, Nova immediately checked the stock of new materials that had been continuously sent to the island since day one and haven't stopped yet. And noticing that the stock seemed sufficient enough for her to begin working with the next phase of the construction on the island, she immediately got to work. She initiated the phase by increasing the energy production of the fusion reactor once again, as the printer came to life and started disintegrating the containers that were about to fill the warehouse to the brim. Hundreds of containers started disappearing at once and in their exchange, massive machines with tracks were being printed. This continued until all the containers within the warehouse were gone. Now in their place stood a massive array of similar tracked machines, which wasted no time and immediately left the printer. After they left the printer, about 10 among these 100 printed tracked machines headed towards the fusion reactor, which at the moment, although was not completely covered underground, still looked shabby, and the few machines that arrived there were responsible for solving that. These machines immediately set to work and started printing a building, which upon its completion would be standing on top of the reactor and will be serving as the main control room for the reactor. Here scientists and other personnel responsible for monitoring the reactor will be stationed. Meanwhile, the remaining hundreds of machines were heading to a large patch of forest, dividing themselves into smaller groups and going to different parts of the forest. However, if one looked at them from a bird's point of view, they would discover that they had aligned together, forming a square, covering a distance of 10 kilometers from all sides. Immediately after making this formation, the machines started their work as they started sinking into the ground, continuing to do so until they reached a depth of 64 meters. After which they stopped sinking further and then started moving sideways, disintegrating the soil that came in their direction as they moved ahead, followed by the disintegrating of the trees on top of this soil and storing the atoms of these trees and soil in their containers, while at the same time straightening and strengthening the ground as they passed, while printing the stored solids within the ground, compacting it and making it the strongest it might have ever been. With hundreds of these machines acting in synchronous motion, the digging, straightening and strengthening of the ground went pretty quickly, resulting in the task being completed in a matter of 2 hours, leaving behind a perfectly measured square hole that was 64 meters deep and 10 kilometers in length on all its 4 sides, a pretty massive task that would have taken humans months to complete to the desired perfection. However, after doing their task, the machines didn't leave the hole, since they had completed only the first phase of their task and were merely waiting for their next order to continue their work. A few seconds later, they entered an idle mode, then some new vehicles arrived before stopping right where the hole began and then started dropping the atom storage containers one after the other into the hole. The machines in the hole did nothing other than wait for the whole process to be completed before they could continue with their work. After dropping about tens of thousands of atom storage containers, the machines that were dropping them stopped and left the vicinity, before returning back to where they had come from. With their retreat, the machines on the ground sprang back to life as they made their moves. One by one, they started collecting the containers before loading the atoms inside of them into themselves, disintegrating the container, carrying the atoms immediately after and repairing any damage caused by them after being dropped from the height of 64 meters. Now that all of the atoms in the containers were being loaded into the machines and the containers were disintegrated, the vehicles immediately started phase 2 of the construction, which was the laying of the foundation. With all the machines working in unison, they started printing a meter-thick foundation on top of their previously strengthened ground, which took them about half an hour to finish, leaving behind a smooth, solid base at the bottom of the hole, which was now completely filled with the printed material. The machines then moved to the next step, printing columns to support the structure that would be printed at the top of these columns later on. Hundreds of thick columns were now being printed on top of the already printed surface, reaching a height of about 20 meters from the base of the hole, which was about halfway to the surface before the machines came to a synchronized halt, allowing the columns to take shape. They then continued printing, but this time it was done sideways. Now slowly but surely they were completing the construction of the bottom-most basement floor, which now had a ceiling that was at a height of 20 meters, pretty large for such a wide floor. When the floor construction was completed, the machines seamlessly returned back to printing another stretch of columns, once again not taking a pause until they had reached a height of another 20 meters from the surface of the new floor, before immediately moving ahead to print the ceiling for this new floor. They then repeated this same process for the third time, in which, similar to before, the columns were raised for 20 meters before printing a ceiling which was now exactly rested on the surface, forming a perfectly flat top. With the lowermost foundation being 1 meter thick, reducing the depth of the hole to 63 meters and the 3 ceilings, each being a meter in thickness. This further reduced the depth hole to 0, leaving behind a 3-floor basement. However, the machines didn't stop there. Some of them started printing new columns while others started printing walls for the massive building that was being constructed. After completing the basic structure of the underground building, the machines started printing the walls. However, this time they were joined by a new batch of similar machines as they helped in the construction of the building much faster. But the batch of these new machines wasn't all there for the construction of the walls. Instead, some of them went to the massive square holes that were left by the previous machines while they were printing the rest of the building. Each of these holes was more than 20 meters in length from all sides and had a number of over 50. These holes were strategically placed in similar positions in all of the printed floors, indicating that they were left there for a purpose, and these new machines immediately started to accomplish their purpose as they started printing what appeared like electromagnetic rail beams that were being placed in the 4 corners of the squares, extending directly from the topmost to the lowermost floor of the building. And while these rail beams were being printed, they were also fused with the printed floor, making sure they were completely secured, not falling out of its designated position unless the whole building were to fall with it. For those who might have watched the ongoing construction a little bit, they would have immediately realized that these square holes left behind were nothing but elevator shafts, and those railgun beams were what will be used to move the elevator. Capable of carrying any heavy loads, no matter how much weight they carried, as long as electricity was provided to raise the elevator, removing the need to put a weight limit on them, since this building was supposed to be housing many machines in the future, which would be quite a problem if it had elevator wasn't capable of carrying weights exceeding a certain weight limits. Now, with the new machines assisting in the contraction of the new and massive building, the construction of the 5 more floors at the top was immediately taken care of in a matter of hours, leaving behind a colossal building project that had a total of 8 floors, 3 underground and 5 floors on the top, was completed in a day, which would have taken humans a year or more for its completion. The building's size itself was intimidating, but the emptiness on its inside was scarier, since the machines had only printed the shell of the building, leaving behind all the interiors and all the necessities to be accomplished by another batch of machines. After that, the whole building will have all the necessities and would be complete and operational ready within a week, and this in itself was an unimaginable feat. Image here. Meanwhile, back to Aaron and John. John now found himself being bombarded with vast amounts of information as if there was no tomorrow. Just a few moments before, the headgear computer immediately filtered all of them and only displayed the information for the things that John was directly looking at. His eyes laid on the cabinet of weapons he had used before had come from, with their stats appearing in front of his face, and now that the headgear was allowed access to the server of the warehouse, the information was now even more detailed than what it previously was. System overview. Model 01. Image here. Power source. Mana in bullet casings. Projectile type. Kinetic slug's muzzle velocity, 2000 meters per second. Maximum range, 6 kilometers. Power levels, magnetic coils, optimal. Cooling systems. Operational status, targeting systems, locked on. Ammo count, 50-50. Barrel temperature, 38 degrees C. Railgun alignment, calibrated. Safety precautions, secondary safeties, engaged unauthorized access, blocked. Emergency shutdown, available. Firing mode, single shot, enabled. Rapid fire, disabled. Burst fire, disabled. Maintenance schedule. Next checkup, 2 weeks. Maintenance status, up to date. He was surprised to see all of this enhanced amount of information that the headgear could now access thanks to the new credential that allowed him to access all of the new information. He then moved his head to the next rack, which had handguns that had a make style similar to the previous guns. Wasting no time, the system responded and displayed its information. Model information. Model 02, power source, mana in bullet casings. Projectile type, electromagnetic rounds. Muzzle velocity, 1500 meters per second. Maximum range, 1750 meters. Power levels, magnetic coils, optimal. Fusion cell, stable. Cooling system, active. Operational status. Targeting systems, locked on. Ammo count, 25/25. Barrel temperature, 32 degrees C. Railgun alignment, calibrated. Safety features, safety lock, enabled. Grip authentication, activated. Emergency deactivation, available. Firing mode, semi-automatic, enabled. Burst mode, disabled. Full auto mode, disabled. Size and portability, compact design, yes. Weight, 500 milligrams. Maintenance schedule, next checkup, 1 month. Maintenance status, up to date. And holy shit, the handgun version of the model did not disappoint him at all, since it was packing comparatively more firepower than any conventional rifles used by any other country's military. The standoff distance of this handgun was almost the same distance as any enemy weapon's maximum firing range. Standoff distance refers to a weapon's ability to outrange the enemy's weapon. Aaron continued to demonstrate the other weapons available in the warehouse. With John wearing the headgear, the process of introducing him to the various weapons became much faster and more efficient. As for that, Aaron said, pointing at a shelf with different-looking bombs that lacked boosters behind them, that is what they call that direction remover. It's responsible for removing the original direction it's sent towards, and you've already seen it in action, albeit in its weakened version. Regarding the boosters for it, Aaron explained, gesturing towards a rack displaying different sizes of boosters. They are inserted after the mission is already planned. There are 3 types of boosters. long range, medium range, and short range. These boosters enhance the capabilities of the direction remover bombs depending on the specific mission requirements. Is this the bomb dropped by the fighter jet? John inquired, his eyes scanning the details of the various-looking bombs on the shelf shown to him by the headgear, all bearing the same name but distinguished by different numbers at the end. Model overview. Name: that direction remover Type 0105. Purpose: precision demolition and neutralization version. Type 01, Type 02, Type 03, Type 04, Type 05. Specifications: blast radius. Adjustable, 50 meters to 15,000 meters. Payload type: high mana explosive activation method, programmable. Deployment: aerial, sea or ground-based. Safety features: arming mechanism, secure remote encryption, active. Fail-safe. Enabled, customization options, blast yield, low, medium, high. Delay timer: programmable directional impact, omnidirectional or selective. Power source, mana power level, stable. Status check. Type 01. Ready for deployment. Type 02. Ready for deployment. Type 03. Ready for deployment. Type 04. Ready for deployment. Type 05. Ready for deployment. Yes, that was the weakest version, Aaron replied, providing further explanation. Its setting was to explode at a time when it would cause the most damage to the designated targets. In that instance, it was the soldiers who survived the initial attack that faced the impact of the explosion. Aaron answered and explained. By the way, how did the soldiers manage to survive such a concentrated explosion? John inquired, his curiosity growing even stronger. Having read the bomb's description, he knew that surviving such an explosion, even in a bunker, seemed improbable without sustaining serious injuries. Moreover, it would require the bunker to have at least 25 meters of concrete or granite between them and the blast to stand a chance of survival.